Hello again, and welcome back to the study of James. One of the many things I love about the book of James is how practical it is. It just reminds us over and over again that living with Christ is much more than simply a mind issue. It's more than just mentally knowing the truth, but it is a heart issue in which we believe in Jesus. And everything changes. And last week we saw one of those changes, which in some ways seems very simplistic, but is so very important, is the change of the way we use our tongue, the way we speak. So today I want us to continue looking at chapter 3. We are in James chapter 3. We'll be looking at verses 13 through 18 today. And he's going to be speaking specifically about those people who consider themselves wise and what it means to say that you have wisdom. So listen to what he says. If you don't mind, today what I'd like to do is read all the way through it, and then I'll go back verse by verse. So James says this, chapter 3, verse 3. Who among you is wise and understanding? By his good conduct, he should show that his works are done in the gentleness that comes from wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and selfish ambition in your heart, don't boast and deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come from above, but it is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where there is envy and selfish ambition, there is disorder, chaos, and every evil practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peace-loving, gentle, compliant, full of mercy and good fruits, unwavering, without pretense. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace to those who cultivate peace. It's a beautiful passage, and one of the challenges that I would encourage you to take is to go back and to read the book of James, and as you do so, read the paragraphs. When the book was originally written, it was not written with verse numbers and chapters. We know that. Those were added later for our convenience. But it was written like a letter. So read it as a letter. And as you do so, you understand that James here is helping address the issue, perhaps of a group of people who are claiming to be wise. Look at what we've accomplished. Look at how wise we are. And James is more concerned about them demonstrating wisdom than claiming to be wise. So listen to what he says. So who among you is wise? The word wisdom, or being wise from a biblical perspective, is when you know the truth and you know how to apply the truth to everyday life. He's asking, so who of you has that type of wisdom where you say, I know what is right and I'm applying it to my life. I know what is right in God's eyes and I'm applying it. And who of you is understanding? The ability to understand means that you see through things. It means that you just don't see the surface, but you understand the deeper things. And for example, we don't just hear the commands of God, but we understand that he gives us these commands because he is a loving God who knows what is best for us. We see through the commands and we understand why they are given to us. So he says, who of you is really wise and understanding? By his good conduct, he should show that his works are done in the gentleness that comes from wisdom. James comes and reminds us right off the beginning, if you claim to be wise, it's going to be seen in the way you live. So who is the wise one? James says, watch the way he lives. It's noted, first of all, by his good conduct. The word that's used here for conduct means way of life. It's not that he occasionally does good things. It means that his life is characterized as one who is consistently doing good things. So it says, by his good conduct, he should demonstrate then that his works are done. By the way, as a reminder, James tells us once we are saved, we have works. It changes our lives. We do things. He should show that his works are done in the gentleness, the cheerfulness that comes from wisdom. In other words, We're using wisdom to help us become more Christ-like and not using it as a badge of honor, nor are we using wisdom that comes from God as an opportunity to beat up other people or to make them feel bad. This doesn't mean we don't correct them, and it doesn't mean that we don't speak the truth to them, but it does mean that we are not consistently seeking wisdom so that we can tear somebody down. On the other hand, we are gentle with them when God gives us instruction or wisdom or shows us a truth within Scripture. We ask how we can apply that to our lives, and then we seek to help other people understand it so that they can become more like Christ. So James tells us the wise person's not the one who has a plaque on their wall or a button on their lapel, but the wise person is the one whose life is changed and is using his wisdom or her wisdom in such a way that is making a difference in another person's life. It goes on, he says this, but on the other hand, if you have bitter envy is when you desire something that's not yours. And perhaps, especially in this context, what they may be envious about is the attention or the position that someone else has. So suddenly they're claiming to be wise so that they can get what they don't have right now. And bitterness is that root that is found within us of hatred. It's where you see somebody and you want it and it becomes an obsession to you and you become very bitter. And he says, if you have bitter envy and if you have selfish ambition, if you have a desire for yourself, wisdom from God is not used for us, it's used for God's honor. But if we start using it for what we desire and for what we can gain, and this is what drives us, it's in our heart, he says, don't boast about that. That's not something to brag about because you are denying the truth. Don't boast and stop denying the truth. Don't boast and don't deny the truth. So James again is forcing us to go and look at our hearts and ask ourselves, so what are we thinking and why are we thinking and why are we doing this? And more importantly, what he's asking us to do is he's asking us to explore our lives and ask the simple question, does my life demonstrate the wisdom that comes from above? Does my life demonstrate that I understand who God is and how it impacts who I am? If not, quit boasting about how wise you are. You're not wise. If you have envy, if you're concerned about yourself, if you are driven to get even or to get what another person has, then don't boast about that and don't deny the truth. James is pretty straightforward in many of his speakings. We saw that where last week, as we looked at James chapter 3, the first verses, he talks about that the tongue is a world of evil. Well, here he says, look, such wisdom does not come down from above. This is not godly wisdom. But on the other hand, it's earthly. It's just common wisdom that you can find among people who don't know God, who don't have Christ as their Savior. And it is a reminder to us that those of us who know Jesus, our wisdom is different. The way that we understand and the way we take the truths of God and apply them to our lives, it causes us to be different than anybody else. And he says, wisdom that has bitter envy and selfish ambition, that's just plain earthly. You see that all around you. He says it's not spiritual. As a matter of fact, it's the complete opposite of spiritual, and it's demonic, reminding us that the source is Satan and that Satan is working in our lives, if this is the case, to try and tear us down and to prevent us from being the people and accomplishing the things that God desired. He goes on, he says, for where there's envy and selfish ambition, where there's that bitter envy and selfish ambition that's found within us, and that's what's driving us, he says, I want you to understand there is disorder, there is chaos in your life. You'll consistently find yourself being directed by trying to gain or get even as opposed to embracing the life that Christ has called us to live. And he says the result of that is that your priorities and the decisions that you make are skewered and they're not done well. So he says there's order, and the result of that is that there are evil practices. There are things that you do where you are trying to gain an advantage, or where you're trying to get what some other person has, or you're trying to receive recognition that you don't deserve. You'll be driven. If ambition and envy drive you, they will drive you to do things that are not characteristic of Christ. And so James is calling us on the carpet, and he's saying, look, you need to examine your life. Here's the context again. James is saying there's a lot of people who are claiming to be wise, but their wisdom is more of a badge of courage. Look at how smart I am. Look at how good I am. And when you misuse wisdom, or when you claim to be wise and you're not, then oftentimes what drives you is going to be envy and bitterness and selfish ambition. And those things are a spiral that just leads downhill. And he says if you don't deal with those things that are found in your life with envy and selfish ambition, there's disorder, and it leads from one thing to another to another. Perhaps there's been a time in your life, there have been those in mine, unfortunately, where you say to yourself, why in the world did I say that? Or why did I do that? And when you begin to look, you see a number of events that went unchecked in your life, where your priorities were out of filter, where you were making decisions that weren't Christ-like, and it simply led you on a path that was far away from God as opposed to demonstrating God's love. And so he says where there's disorder and every kind of evil practice, it's a reminder there's probably envy and selfish ambition that's there as well. I heard this say, when you talk about bitterness, I've met in ministry and throughout life, I've met many people who are controlled by bitterness. And if we're not careful, we become controlled by bitterness. Will Rogers once said that bitterness is like drinking poison and hoping it kills the other person. That is true. You just become more and more bitter. I've encountered some people that by the time their life was over, they had really forfeited the joy of life that God had given them. And they became just more and more bitter. And they thought their bitterness would hurt others, and it didn't. So then he goes on, he says, so this is not the wisdom. Here's the wisdom that we want. Here's where we can tell that we're living as Christ has called us to live, whether we're obedient to his word. So he says that wisdom that comes from above, not that's earthly, is first of all, it's pure. The word used there means it's holy. There's not mixed motives. It's not that you have to question why or what am I doing. You're doing it because it's a reflection of who God is. It's peace-loving. The word that's used there means that we are seeking to draw people together. You can tell a wise person, and I can think of a number of people at Metairie Baptist who demonstrate this type of wisdom in their lives, and they're consistently drawing people together. They are those unifiers among us. They are seeking for there to be peace and wholeness, both, by the way, in the individual's life, but also in the corporate life. Then they're gentle. The word that's used there for gentle is a word which implies that you are cautious and careful. We recognize that when you are helping others and you're helping them become more like Christ, that it is a journey, and you help them on the journey as opposed to condemning them along the way. Occasionally I have men that I work with, or I'm helping through a crisis, and they say things like, I just can't seem to make good progress. And it would be so easy for me to jump in and say, you're right, you're not making good progress. But gentle wisdom says, you know what? Living with Christ is a journey. And the key thing is that you are consistently moving forward in that journey. So keep up with the good work. It's gentle. It's compliant. Compliant means you're obedient, specifically obedient to God. It's his wisdom, his direction for our life that matters. You're full of mercy. Mercy is when we do not give to people what they deserve. You've heard me say this before. If you've heard me speak much, I'm always cautious as somebody who says, I hope they get what they deserve. I'm thankful that God in his mercy did not give us what we deserve. And so we need to be people who are merciful as well. We need to be people who are producing good fruit, beneficial works, that we're helping other people. That's the word good fruit. That we are unwavering. There's that consistency. And that we're without pretense. This is interesting to be added there, that we are without pretense. Literally, it says that we're not a hypocrite. Part of being without pretense means that all of us confess, you know what, we're all on this journey together. And so what James tells us in verse 17 is one of those verses you'll want to go back and just look over and over again, is that if we're living a wise life, if we're living the life that Christ has called us to live, then we'll make sure that our motives are pure. We'll make sure that we're seeking to bring about wholeness and peace in the lives of others, as well as in the church and in the church family. That we're gentle, like that, caring for that newborn lamb, or holding that new baby. We are gentle. That we're compliant, we're obedient to the Word of God. By the way, obedient in our own lives, and that we are obedient as we move toward others. That we're merciful people. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. It's the words of Jesus. That we have good fruits, that we're making a difference in a very positive and beneficial way in the lives of others. That we're unwavering, that there's consistency, and that we're without pretense, that we admit, you know what, we're on this journey too. We're not perfect, but we're seeking to become more and more like Christ every day. And by the way, that we demonstrate mercy to somebody because we've received mercy, and we love others because we've been loved. There's no pretense there. And then James ends in verse 18. He says, and the fruit of righteousness, the fruit of all this wisdom that's put into practice, it's sown in peace by those who cultivate. The word that's used there for peace is a word which means wholeness. And he says when we are wise individuals, we are individuals who are making a difference in peace, seeking the wholeness of others, and seeking to be whole ourselves. And we cultivate that and continue to work toward that. It's something that doesn't happen automatically, but instead it is something that happens as we seek to live a wise life in peace. The fruit of righteousness, what God desires to accomplish within our lives. It is sown in peace by those who cultivate peace. May God bless you to seek to live for Him. Today, let's strive with all our minds, with God working within us, to be individuals who demonstrate the wisdom that James shows us in verse 17 as we live a life that is pure, peace-loving, gentle, compliant, full of mercy, full of good fruits, unwavering, without pretense. May God bless you.